Hello everyone, and welcome to my course on creating a visual novel inside of Unity. As my followers are aware, this is a revised version of my previous series from a couple years ago, which has really started to show its age in a lot of ways. Unity's changed, and now we've got deprecated features that just aren't useful anymore. So, decide to create a new version, and that's what I'm going to show you how to make through this series. In this series, you're going to learn how to create your own visual novel engine inside of the amazing Unity engine. Now, I say a VN engine, visual novel engine, but it's more of like an interpreter, because we're not building a complete engine from the ground up. I mean, we're using something that's already established, Unity. But still, the coding process is going to be great for anyone who wants to just learn more of Unity, or is getting it started in coding, I think this is something and a fun project that'll help a lot of people out. But being built with the Unity backbone, you'll be able to incorporate this system into really any dialogue-based game. So it doesn't have to be a visual novel. The elements that I'll be showing you how to make, you could put into literally any kind of Unity game, and that's the beauty of it. But I'll be walking you through the entire process from creating a new scene in Unity, to making a working dialogue system in the Unity UI, all the way to writing novel files and running them inside of Unity, and finally to exporting and making your very own visual novel. Now, before we get into that, I should say, this series is not entirely for beginners. While I do focus beginners and I do address a lot of things specifically for those who may be new to Unity, I can't say that this will be specifically geared towards beginners, and that's because this series is about 95% heavy scripting, so you need to be comfortable in the code editor and fairly comfortable navigating around Unity. That said, I do keep beginners in mind through this course, so everything will be coded live, and I'll explain everything as we're going through the whole process, so don't worry about me leaving you behind or not understanding something. If you have trouble, just pause or ask a question, but I'll try to go over everything so that way, whether you're a beginner or you're new, it's not going to go too slow or too fast for you. That's my goal here. But as long as you don't mind listening to me talk, I think you'll be just fine. But if you don't have much C# or general programming experience at all, I do encourage you to check out the video in the description first. It's a 4-hour course on C#, learning the basics and getting into it, and if you go through that video, I think you'll be very comfortable to proceed through the rest of this series. It's a good beginner course to get you familiar with C#, which is the programming language that I'll be using for this course. Now, another thing I want to make mention of is this series may not be for you. I know every YouTuber wants to get as much traffic as they can, more views, but hey, I don't want to waste y'all's time, okay? So this may or may not be something that would be good for your purpose. So there are many options out there for creating visual novels already, and Unity is just one of them. You've got well-established tools like RenPy and a paid Unity asset called Novel that can give you all you need to write your novels and make them into a game, and it's all ready for you right now. It'll just involve a learning curve like everything else in order to use it. So who is this series not for? This series is probably not for you if those options, being that they're quick and already established, is something you'd rather go for. If you're looking to just get your hands on something to write your novel and get it published quickly, if you have an idea and you want to work on it now, and you don't want to wait, then go get RenPy or Novel. Those things will get you immediately on your feet, because we're literally building our system from next to nothing. It's going to be a blank Unity project. So then who is this series for? I would say if you're someone who wants to learn programming in a fun project-based way, or someone who just wants to create their own tool fine-tuned to their specific purpose, if you want to create something that's yours, and yours to add, change, remove, and use however you want in whatever projects you want, visual novel or regular Unity game alike, then I would say this series is something that is probably for you. Now, before we get into making the entire visual novel, jumping into it, first of all, let's talk about what makes a visual novel good. We need to have an idea in mind. And I want to go over a few things that we need to understand about a visual novel before we start making the system to build ours. First off, the allure of a visual novel, like any other book or movie, is undoubtedly a compelling story and interesting characters. The dialogue, music, art, and design of your novel play a huge part in what attracts people to read and play it to begin with, But you want to make sure that you come up with a good story. You want to make sure that you have characters that people will like. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what your art looks like. People aren't going to want to read it. They want something entertaining. They want something to root for, you know? So make sure that you have that, but also make sure that you come up with a design that'll be visually and audibly appealing. And there are many visual novels out there right now that you can look at for inspiration, but what makes them really memorable, what makes them stand out, is when you break out of the cookie-cutter style and design it uniquely in your own artistic way. That means anywhere from how the dialogue appears on screen and just the general layout of the UI, and even how the camera works with the game. All these things can come into play to make a style that is uniquely yours, or a little bit different. Now, still to this day, an older visual novel called Nom Nom Nami is still one of my most memorable ones that I've played because it had such a unique little storybook look to it. But additionally, another one, Max Massacre, that one was very cookie-cutter style, and yet I really enjoyed that one because of the relationship between the two characters, the dialogue, and it was entertaining. So, as long as you have one or the other, you should be good, but if you have them both, then your visual novel is going to be great. Now, you should be aware of the layers that make up a visual novel. For instance, our new channel mascot, Stella here, she's a character. And characters are generally on one of several layers for a visual novel. You've got the first layer, which is the background. This is the most common place for images and videos that represent the scene to be at. And second, you've got the character layer, and this is where Stella and other characters will show up at. Then you've got the dialogue layer on top of them, and this is where all the text is going to render out on screen. And sometimes you might have a layer between the character and the dialogue, which is what we call a cinematic layer. And you'll see this used in games when they hit key moments and a nice looking graphic pops up. Usually these are graphics that are added to a gallery for your unlocks as well, which we'll be covering that in the series too. But above the dialogue layer and above that cinematic, you've got a foreground layer, and this would be for anything that needs to render above the dialogue and characters, such as maybe cinematic movies or cutscenes. And above it all would be your control layer. And this is just the layer where your controls go for the player to interact with, such as accessing settings, enabling options, or quitting the game. And it's important to have this laid out in your head so you can visualize how we're going to build it, the structure of it all. It's important to have all these layers in the right stack, not only for graphics' sake, but also for functionality, because through the series, we'll want to separate some basic raycasting functions to get the proper player interaction between them. Now, as I've said, we're going to be creating a sort of engine, an engine inside of an engine, and because we're building this inside of Unity. So what I mean is more of an interpreter. We write chapter files, but we need to build an interpreter to read those, and then apply them onto screen with the proper effects and the proper commands. But here are some of the features that we'll be including in this series. We'll have standalone UI-based dialogue system. We'll have UI characters and controls. We'll have an audio manager, file handling and encryption system. We'll have that dialogue interpretation system for our chapter files, input and choice screens, history and text logs, a gallery, a fully functional save and load system, and much more. There's a lot to cover here, so I'm not going to waste anyone's time with nonsense. We're going to hit the ground running and keep rolling to the end. I'm going to focus on being concise and to the point that I don't waste any of y'all's time, or my own for that matter. But before we get started, I want everyone to go ahead and check out the demo video in this description if you haven't, because it showcases a lot of the features that we're going to be creating. It doesn't have everything in there, but it does have a lot of what we're going to be making in this series. Nothing's worse than a tutorial that tells you what you're going to make, but the end result is different than what you were expecting. So I want you to see what we're creating before you start getting into it and before you invest your time into this series. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out. That link's in the description. But that's it, and that's what I've got here. That's the plan, and if this still sounds like something that you want to be a part of, then get ready and join me in the next video, because we're going to start creating this system from the ground up. Also, if you like the content, please consider subscribing, liking the video, doing all that fancy stuff. If you'd also like to support the channel, I do have a Patreon down below as well. And I also have a Discord set up. So if you guys have questions throughout the series, which I know there will be, I won't be able to answer everything. I may not go in depth as some more beginner folks would like, so please by all means join the Discord server and ask your questions there, and I'll get to you guys. We got channel set up for Q&A if anyone gets stuck at any point. So with all that out of the way, I will see you in the next video.